Hello and welcome to another episode of the Internet Capital Markets podcast. In this episode, we speak with Farhaj, who is co-founder of Forma. Forma is the team behind what you may have heard of, known as the Solana Economic Zone or the SEZ. And essentially, Solana economic zones are BD deals or business deals between the internet economy of Solana and the physical geography of a country that is looking to attract both talent and capital into its geography. And it's really born out of this insight that a lot of the crypto economies have capital that aggregates in various shapes or forms. And you can take this capital and go and settle in newer jurisdictions that are more aligned with your ideology, right? And so it isn't necessarily always about tax optimization, it's a little bigger than that. And so in the last year or so, I think the Forma team has run activations in Argentina. They've had activations in Sri Lanka, in Hangama, and more recently in both Kazakhstan and Georgia. And I think this is for both sort of Sarthak and me, this is one of the most exciting experiments in the crypto space where you're taking a lot of the digitally native activity or the online activity and it's meeting land, it's going IRL. And we hope you guys really enjoy it. All right. Hello and welcome. We have today with us from Solana Economic Zones, our good friend Farhaj. Thank you, Farhaj, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So today we're going to talk about a few things around Solana Economic Zones. Why don't we kick off with, what is a Solana Economic Zone? Why does it exist? And what is the approach of an ecosystem in dealing with a government versus an exchange or a company?
The idea for Solana economic zones came on one of Babak, my co-founder, and I's road trips back from Abu Dhabi when we used to do government BD for BuildSpace. And so BuildSpace got to this inflection point where basically the world's largest tuition-free school for entrepreneurs. We got to this inflection point where we had 200,000 people doing courses on the internet, handful of them starting to create companies, some of those companies taking off, a lot of them getting into YC, a lot of them raising money, a lot of them becoming really successful, 7-8 figures in revenue on the internet. And we were like, man, now we live in this completely different time where anyone with an internet connection can launch a business on the internet and start earning dollars. And they don't have to make the great migration, to America. I think Akshay Balaji talked about the TCP/IP visa, but it was a very big demonstration of that happening. And so we had this really wild idea. We're like, what if we approach countries and try to work with them to solve like national economic goals by enabling entrepreneurship at scale? A lot of companies, I guess Techstars, Antler had done it at a small size where they'd go and run these country-sponsored accelerators. We're like, what if we did it at scale? Long story short, after 3 months on the road, Abu Dhabi government literally gave us like an offer for $10 million to run the first experiment where we built this like entrepreneurship-focused neighborhood. And yeah, on one of my road trips back, I was like, Babak, it's kind of crazy. And he didn't know much about crypto at the time. And I've been in Solana ecosystem like 3 or 4 years. I was like, if we went to countries, and we didn't have the same proposition as BuildSpace where we're kind of seeking for revenue generating opportunities to work on this, right? Because we couldn't do it for free. Everything else we were already doing for free. If we were a network and we had our own economic engine, we might be able to actually trade with a country, in return for its resources. And we might be able to make a lot more sophisticated kind of deals, and at that time, we were talking to 2 types of countries. So there were what we called talent-rich and dollar-poor countries, and then countries that had a deficit of talent and a surplus of capital, right? And so that's the example is the UAE, Greece, Japan. And then the other example is Argentina, Kenya, and a lot of the other countries where there were a lot of huge, interesting opportunities, but there was no commercial pathway for a venture-backed company like BuildSpace to prioritize working with them. And so I was like, man, if we represented Solana and, Solana has this amazing bottom-up movement, which is super team. But if we represented the economic engine that is this internet native city, it's almost like New York or San Francisco on the internet, we might be able to trade and do some crazy stuff. Long story short, a month and a half later, I ended up, catching like the entrepreneurial bug, decided to leave BuildSpace and I was marinating on what to build next. And I couldn't stop sleeping. I kept thinking about this idea. And I gave our mutual friend Akshay BD a call. It was the first call we started talking about it. And I was like, what if Solana went to a country and started, very preliminary level trade discussions, and eventually was able to get into such level of parity in terms of collaboration that we could get our own like a digital economic zone that could maybe be a physical economic zone within these countries. And we don't need for an actual special economic zone to start with, because Solana is already a digital economic zone. Basically, it's the best place on the internet to start a bank account with a few clicks, launch a company with a few lines of code, start earning money on the internet through digital dollars. So we're like, what if we kind of represented that network state and started to work with these nation states? And so yeah, it was a really crazy idea. We're like, man, we don't know what to do. And basically, we saw that there was a huge opportunity to try this experiment specifically in frontier markets that were being ignored. Because there's no lack of competition in the US and even in India and some of these other places where people are competing for either capital or talent. But there's some of the other places that were overlooked. At that point, it was Argentina. And we were like, what if we just made a banger video, just introduce the meme to the world, because the combination of the three words, Solana economic zone, is really wild, and just named a country as the place where we're going to test this thesis. Yeah, that was 2 years ago. I mean, since then, we've worked on all sorts of crazy stuff with governments around the world. And now we even have countries that have officially recognized Solana economic zones, and some even interested in establishing physical ones. So yeah, that's the lore.
Awesome. No, that's great. I mean, I've seen, within the ecosystem, seen that grow out. And I guess to sort of, like try and double click a bit on when you say people don't need to make the great migration, and Solana is like San Francisco or Silicon Valley online. Can you talk about how that plays out? Like, what does sort of Solana offer to these countries that they want, and why, and what does sort of people on Solana get from these countries at a very high level? And then we'll go into specific examples of the SEZs that y'all have done already.
Mhm. Yeah, I think when we talk about vampire tax, we usually think about it in terms of Web3. But what people have really not addressed is how like the US basically vampire attacked the rest of the world by virtue of Delaware, and making it the preferred jurisdiction for startups. Now any measurably successful startup in any country, because the high kind of risk appetite capital exists in San Francisco, this entrepreneurial culture exists in San Francisco, immediately incorporates for $540 on Stripe Atlas, their company in Delaware, and now runs all of their fiscal operations there. And sometimes they decide in the future to make their company backwards capital with their parent jurisdiction. You think about it. And so I think with Solana, it was I don't think necessarily when Totally and Roger coming up with the idea of Solana, they were like, yeah, we're going to disrupt Delaware. They were just like that stack on the internet, but the kind of second degree order of events that happened is now, like, genuinely, there are a lot of unicorns that can work on the internet, run remote teams, be based in alternate jurisdictions, and have all of the revenue and all of their activity happening natively on the internet. They don't need to go to America, like, and they can just like vote with their feet, their wallet, and their time in their preferred jurisdiction. And I think an example is like Jupiter, right? It's like a Malaysian-born unicorn. There are so many companies in Southeast Asia, now a lot in Middle East, a lot in Europe, who are forced to flee, unfortunately, because of bad regulation. But a lot of these jurisdictions that would never be, HQ1, or even where the kind of primary secondary entity is set up, are now places where that's happening. And I think there were just a lot of things that happened in parallel. I think, of course, Operation Choke Point 2.0 was a very big contributor to this, when even American founders are being driven out of the US and forced to incorporate in alternate jurisdictions like PVI, Panama, Cayman. Singapore then became an actual established jurisdiction, same with ADGM and DIFC. And so it's like all of these things kind of happen at the same time. And I think what Solana really allowed is it forked the one thing that was really difficult for countries to fork. Because like when I used to go do this like roadshow, when we were at Bill Space, I used to talk to like literally the foreign direct investment agencies and sovereign wealth funds of the countries. And I'd be like, what Bill Space figured out is if you think about an ecosystem, and even at a country level, this really happens, where value creation happens, at the top is where you have liquidity, right? Where companies go public, and like employees get rich, and the investors get rich, and now there's like liquidity that's being brought back into the market because this amazing thing exists. But there's a lot of different contributors that lead up all the way to that stage. Like how I like to think about it is like there are people who are participants like in the economy. A handful of them get charged up, activated to become producers, and our super team is fully focused on unlocking producers. People who are willing to are able to trade their time, but doing something they're passionate about in return for dollars. Some of them get motivated enough to start companies. They become founders. Handful of those founders get access to capital that allows them to become startups, eventually scale ups, and then they exit. Right? Where San Francisco is a huge anomaly, in New York, in some of these larger cities, is the participant to producer, participant to startup area. They've created an unreplicatable culture, right? Where failure is encouraged, where high risk capital is moving in to support these people, to allow for people to iterate and fail faster, and then eventually build really crazy things. And in Saudi, in UAE, in Japan, all these countries we're talking at the time, it was very easy for them because they're capital rich nations to fork the capital framework, right? To allow for, let's call it scale ups to get the liquidity. But it was impossible for them to replicate the cultural framework. And I think on day one, what Solana did really well is it brought the capital onto the internet, and then it actually brought that culture onto the internet. And from like our kind of internet native public goods that are now also very successful private companies, like Hackathon, Stern, and the Coliseum. Super teams started off as just like funding developers, and now are like literally like economically integrated in some of these countries. Um, I think that's like what makes Solana so special is outside of Build Space for the first time where I saw that hacker culture and this like kind of like environment that encouraged failure get forked to the internet with the capital layer kind of involved too. So end of rant. But for me, when I saw that happen, I was like, man, this is sick. And it's going to be really, really hard for people to replicate the same network effects in other ecosystems. And while we have it, and because we have a foundation, unlike most other foundations, I worked with almost every single early kind of stage Web3 foundation when we did open source developer content in Build Space. I saw the Solana Foundation had this kind of Uber kind of philosophy where they were like, we're happy to meet governments and countries where they're at. We're not going full cypherpunk necessarily and calling governments evil. Like we want to collaborate with them and collectively prosper because this is going to be the technology it's going to support, a lot of the world in the future. So Babak and I were like, oh, let's see if we kind of bridge the gap.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I have one question which is slightly tangential, but when you are at Build Space, right? So Build Space is like not to sort of trivialize it, but it's like a place where you learn how to code and build startups, right? It's like a ed tech company in some ways, right? Build Space, which was your
Yep.
former the venture you're part of. When you were there, how did you think of approaching and selling to governments? Because
Yeah.
I don't know if Coursera or any of these edtech platforms think of governments as a customer, right? Like you run Google and Facebook ads and you make content and you just reach out to anyone in a country with an internet and a credit card and sell to them. What sort of prompted you to go sell to governments when you were at Build Space?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Um, I think it was like three things. So like one is I was just seeing this happen in real time where people were going from zero to entering like what I like to define as like the internet middle class, where they were going from literally like nothing. We had like people in villages in Africa go from nothing to now making $100,000 a year, and it was like the wildest phenomenon. And the kind of like spillover economic effects that were happening in their families and their villages was really cool and crazy. And I know even Super Team made a documentary called Super Teens about these teenagers who bought their parents' homes from kind of building products on the internet. And at the same time, immigration in America was getting really difficult, and regulation in Europe was getting really difficult. And I felt like the American dream and the kind of like the Europe or Canada being a safe place for young people to go to have high career potential and eventually mobility, which is get access to a passport, started to disappear in plain sight. And it felt like the risk reward ratio of traveling to this other jurisdiction and taking that risk and getting, to get to the middle class, like it didn't make sense anymore. The calculus doesn't make sense anymore. So it felt like a really awesome opportunity for a country, because I was born and raised in Dubai. So I've always just thought like countries can operate like startups because I've seen one operate like a startup. So I was like, some smart country probably has some smart policy leader that might think of this as a really amazing opportunity to build like, an alternative to SF for the people who can make it there on their journey to the internet middle class for building startups. And so I kind of pitched the idea to Farza, and he's like, that's insane. Why don't you start shooting a bunch of cold messages? And then, 3 weeks of LinkedIn outbounds later, I started to actually talk to governments. So, yeah.
That's wild. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We'll switch into the next sort of section now where we talk about the different SEZs that have happened so far, right? So you've got what year was like Argentina? Was it 2024 September?
When was Breakpoint Singapore? It was a
Breakpoint
few months before
Singapore
that.
was I think September 2024. So this must have been July 2024, right? Like I feel like this industry just warps your perception of time, right? Like
Yeah.
you believe that Trump was elected in November and all of this regulation has happened in the last 7 months, like 8 months, 10 months.
Yeah, it feels like 3-4 years.
You guys have your financial year starting with the break point. It's like everything is referenced around, where you guys met. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah, it's wild. Okay, but so now to sort of switch into the stuff that SECs have done so far, right? Can you just take us through like almost like a time travel, time capsule of, you did Argentina first, then you did Ahangama, which was in Sri Lanka. You had then you had one at Kazakhstan, which was extra special, and then you have some stuff coming up. So can you just take us through each of these quickly and like what was the highlight or what stood out for you from each of the SEZs all done so far?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with us, the core belief like Babak and I have had from day one is that there are all of these like regional financial hubs that are like undermarketed and super ignored. And that's probably where we have like the highest amount of alpha, not just for Solana, but also from like a government BD perspective. Because probably people tried to do government BD, but it was transactional. No one went in, trying to actively physically spend time with the countries. So we have this problem of booking tickets before we even know people in places, and sometimes just kind of figuring it out after we land. But in Argentina, I think timing was right. Like Milei had just become president. This entire continent that was dealing with all sorts of economic issues just finally had like a libertarian person who said crypto is cool for the first time. And there was just a lot of attention on the internet. It might not look like it, but we're kind of data driven with some of the decisions we make. I look at Google Trends. I look at travel data. I start to see the kind of digital nomad activity on Nomad Hub, and kind of consider all of these things together to be like, okay, it's like sleeping giant that just needs to be given a little bit of a shove and pushed into the mainstream, which is where Solana's distribution really helps us get started. So we announced the Argentina event before we had even really talked to a lot of people in government. We interacted with someone in the state government, but we didn't get really close to the national government. And the first model of Horma was inspired by Zuzalu, the Ethereum pop-up village that they did in Montenegro. We were like, okay, can we spend a month together and convince people both locally and internationally to come together, spend time? And every week we ran an experiment. 1 week was around policy. 1 week was around just like helping founders. One was about like the creative economy. And we had an entire week dedicated to stablecoins because Argentina has one of the highest penetration rates for stablecoin adoption. Long story short, we did that one. It was cool. They had a local thing called Crecimiento that was happening at that time. It's getting pretty controversial now, I guess. But for us, it's always been, okay, can we like find like 4 to 5 like diehard Solana evangelists and then some really good contacts in the government and then activate them to set them up independently for long-term success. And so I think the most exciting part about Argentina is we had this local company that was running tether payments for restaurants and bars launched Solana in 2,000 stores. So now anyone can pay with USDT in 2,000 stores with Solana. Then we had local Solana Max and Argentinian set up a physical Solana hub completely with his own money, and the first validator for Solana in Argentina, and start running developer education, founder programs, and subsidized for the most part by the ecosystem. It's called SolXR. We then started to get some inbound from other countries that was like interested just in this concept of Solana economic zone, because it's crazy. We had a 0 follower Twitter account, and over like a chaotic period of 3 weeks and 5 time zones, we made our first video and we dropped it, and it went like 750,000 impressions or something like that, like in 3 days. So it really became a part of public discourse. And so that was Argentina. And it was cool because we had this kind of like experience and cultural side to it, where we really wanted the people who came together to feel like they could spend time with each other. We were trying to test out this like network state thesis, where we're like, can just like affinity for a chain, just Solana, bring people together, and they find out they have a lot of things that's similar, and they start to build a strong community. And so in Sri Lanka, the kind of hypothesis was I'm an Indian citizen, so no hate to my homies. But with the regulatory situation in India and all the difficulties that it brings, I just thought that there's a population of almost, a billion and a half, close to 2 billion people in that surface area that has no home outside of Dubai and Singapore. And I really wanted to find a country that had a chance to build something special. And that's kind of when I came across Sri Lanka. I noticed the nomad movement patterns there. They have a huge digital nomad culture. No one knows about it. And they were building the special economic zone called Colombo Port City, which is a fork of DIFC. And they had full regulatory autonomy that started construction. This town, Ahangama, was starting to look something like a Bali, where I was kind of doing some research on the internet and saw a lot of smart people were moving there. And so that's kind of where we decided to go and focus on the experience. Where we're like, hey, since we're going to do Sri Lanka anyway, we'll tell the story of this new special economic zone and give them some constructive feedback on their policy and maybe just inform the central bank, who was not really crypto forward at that time. It's now been progressively actually leading closer towards becoming crypto progressive, about policy changes they can make to make it attractive place for crypto nomads to move there. And then host this amazing week-long experience that people can come easily travel to without thinking about visa issues, which is a problem for most South Asians and Africans in our ecosystem, and just like meet each other and hopefully get excited to start companies and do a whole bunch of stuff. And the cool thing is kind of by virtue of doing that and building, the organic media for those things. And I think, unlike basically any other pop-up city, were the first ones who started to formally talk in government metrics about our impact, using words like foreign direct investment, how many companies were attracted, showcasing the economic impact of some of these small experiments that started during our pop-up and then led into actual economic contribution to the state. And during Babak's trip to Saudi, where they invited us to like the World Investment Forum, he was just speaking about the Solana economic zone stuff. The Kazakhstan governor of Astana National Financial Center, their special economic zone there, like they just ran into each other and had a chat. And like a month later, they were like, you know what? Our country's like really thinking about crypto seriously. I'm going to be in Abu Dhabi during Finance Week. Why don't we catch up? And that was just it, like we met with them. Akshay was there too. We just learned how sophisticated, like, the Kazakh government was. The head of AIFC is super experienced in capital markets. He was really excited about the idea of ICM. And he was like, why don't we organize this like roadshow for you to just come down and meet a bunch of people in Kazakhstan? And then we just had like some amazing meetings. I mean, when we got there, it was, and this is so funny, I think these were all like 6 months, and 6 months this all happened, or 8 months. So on the 9 months, we flew to Kazakhstan right after Sri Lanka, basically, and met with the central bank, the Ministry of Digital Development, the economic zone, all of the executives, national bank, like just all of these high-level stakeholders, and even interact with the president's office. And they're like, look, no one basically from crypto has flown and spent time with our government. And you guys seem very earnest and intentional about setting up a long-term hub here. And I'm sure you know of Talgat now, who's also an amazing champion for us to have. And they were like, why don't we formalize this relationship and host like the first ever Solana trade mission to Kazakhstan, where we're going to host your representative Solana like we host a government. And we can work towards some really awesome announcements together. And so that kind of brought with it the dual listing IPOs on the Astana National Exchange, Kazakh stablecoin, a national currency stablecoin launching on Solana. Now they have developer education programs that are getting integrated into national universities, and even Solana being considered as a back end chain or an entire city, right? Crypto city. So, yeah.
I have a bunch of questions here, which is the fact that you mentioned you track, say, digital nomads and where they're really going.
Yeah.
And the fact that you didn't really mention like a Bali or a Da Nang. Do you
Yeah.
think it's countries and economies who are facing some kind of financial or economic trouble where they're willing to take a bet because they feel this is one thing which could possibly attract new businesses which are more new age, and in Indonesia or a Vietnam have a lot more to lose in terms of trade partnerships with bigger companies in Southeast Asia, and they may not want to antagonize like a China or in India and say, okay, we're going to just keep doing what we're already doing because there is revenue and there's economic development happening anyway. And I would think the fact that Sri Lanka has gone through its phase of economic troubles and the currency being heavily devalued, it ends up becoming a reason for them to say, okay, this is somewhere where we can really take a bet. Very similar to how countries that start selling second citizenship feel like, okay, maybe this is one opportunity for us to just attract the right kind of investment. Do you think that is also a thesis?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, it was just a lot easier to have conversations with countries that were, in our opinion, pre-PMF. So like Indonesia has product market fit with tourism. Vietnam has product market fit with tourism and exports. And so Kazakhstan, for example, has extremely successful, industrial business. So from energy to minerals to a lot of export, they're succeeding. But a lot of countries you speak to had formalized a very strong plan for the digital economy specifically. And so when we saw some of the literature and we saw how they were thinking about it, and they were speaking about some metrics like increasing e-governance adoption, they were either thinking about a CBDC or a stablecoin already, increasing cashless payments, or like in Kazakhstan's example, they have Kaspi, which is almost like UPI with 95% cashless transaction. We were like, wow, like these are countries that are going to play this game for the next 10 years. So if we go in early and we can earnestly contribute to them winning in that game, they're pretty excited to chat with us, So that was our assumption. Yeah.
When I kind of analyze countries around Africa, I mean, what I've really seen and experienced is Rwanda is actually very pro any new technology, and they're willing to kind of change rules to have newer people come in and build something, and they like to be called and be bonded around like the Singapore of Africa. Um,
Yep.
you attempted doing this in Rwanda? Because I hear from people who come from Rwanda that the government is very willing to get people to do stuff in agri-tech, in drones and robotics, which are actually banned in a lot of other countries where they can't run experiments. They can actually go to Rwanda and do this. So have
Yeah.
you attempted that in any way?
Yeah, I mean, we spoke to Kigali. So Kigali International Financial Center, world-class special economic zone in Rwanda. I mean, now they have a Carnegie Mellon in Rwanda, by the way.
Wow.
Yeah, so only Carnegie Mellon outside of America that's there. And so, yeah, super sophisticated, super exciting. They were a little bit, when we talked to them, and I'm sure next 6 months, based on what we know now, Africa is going to go through a big crypto renaissance. Like we've been speaking to multiple central banks, multiple ministries. I think it's just a matter of timing, and that's kind of what we've been thinking too. Is like, how do you like flip a region? That's something we've been very intentional about. It's like, okay, when we go into the region, what country has enough cultural, economic, kind of prowess, is kind of the largest economic hub for a region, and if you can kind of help them become this crypto progressive state, then all the others will follow because they don't want to miss on the action. That was what we did with Argentina. That's what we did with Kazakhstan. Sri Lanka, I think, was a little bit different because we were like, this is going to be a new Bali. Bali is overrun, and they have the ability to design it right and learn from Bali's mistakes. So it's pretty interesting for us to get a head start. This is why we're also going to Georgia after this. Same thing, So the Africa, I think there's going to be like 3 to 4 big winners. So there'll be like the Lusophone ones, the Francophone ones, which are the language-bound zones, and then like the corridors, like a Kenya, Ghana. But there's one country I think actually that can become the Singapore of Africa, and I almost moved there. They're doing it, but we're very excited to see how that one pans out.
Right.
Yeah.
My next question is more from the perspective of incentives. Governments can actually take much long-term bets because their job is to kind of build infra and have the ecosystem slowly develop.
Yeah.
But you being like a private business of sorts, when you kind of enter into these partnerships, do you also look for some kind of subsidies or government monetary support which would at least take care of your business interests in the short term to build this ecosystem for them? Or are you just riding it, hoping that we'll take this bet, and if it works out, it's good for us, if it doesn't? So do you have like a personal lens for your business which is different from those of these economies?
Yeah, I mean, I think like how these like massive AI startups have like forward deployed engineers. Like I've been saying like blockchains need like forward deployed business developers who can kind of interface and be like the network brokers, between the network and like certain kind of pockets. Institutions is one, enterprise is proven, government is an entire new forte. And so for us, we've been very lucky, just like Super Team, we're fully funded by the foundation. And so when we walk into a country and say, hey, we need nothing from you actually, and we're going to make a banger marketing video for you, and what we've really studied your economy and we understand your cultures and your customs, we want to talk about bringing more founders from your country into our economy and helping them get VC funding, get access to grants. We want to upskill your developers for free. We want more Kazakhs to earn $100,000 on the internet by doing developer work because there's a high concentration of Rust devs. They get very excited because there's literally no financial transaction, between like us or Solana and them. It's a mutually beneficial, proper trade relationship. And so, yeah, that was really cool.
You're kind of funded by the Solana Foundation, and the Solana Foundation is actually doing so much to build the ecosystem globally with like a long-term vision. So it's almost like they are thinking like a government, and then they've got nodes which include your organization to just enable things for the entire ecosystem.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's what super teams are amazing for bottom up. And what we want to do is we want to see, okay, can we go top down, establish an amazing working relationship with the country? And then what if we launch a super team with their blessing and with their buy-in? Maybe we can like 10x the impact on day one. And I think that's what we did in Kazakhstan. And I think this model will start to now replicate, in probably like a lot of different territories. Yeah.
And I just asked one question, and I'll let Aditya move on to the next section, which is, imagine if someone today, and this is a
Yep.
little bit of an aside, someone today wants to get into this ecosystem, work with the Solana Foundation. They realize, okay, we really want to contribute. We're a little lost. We know a little bit of coding and development. Should they look at joining you, Farhaj? Would you need more hands on deck to kind of do what you are doing? Or do you see certain ancillary and adjacent areas where no one's really building, and you would say maybe I would nudge them in that direction and enable like a grant from the Solana Foundation, which would make our job easier? So do you think such opportunities exist?
Yeah, I mean, it depends, to be frank. At the end of the day, if someone is very interested about turning, a city or country into a Solana economic zone, it's not that hard for them to start with the meme and make it a reality eventually. They don't need permission, you know? And so I'd say like the best thing we do would be to host our first ever pop-up village. Like I have a friend who did this in Brazil. It's called Ipe City, and they hosted a 350-person pop-up village in Floripa. This is a beautiful island where you can surf all day and a bunch of tech people live there. And they've done 2 iterations of this, and they didn't need that much capital to actually run it. They had some ecosystem companies support them, and basically after the second iteration, the government took notice of them, and now they're starting to work on policy together. So I think there's multiple ways to get this done, but kind of like Balaji said, I don't know if you saw his latest tweet, like pop-ups are the new startups. And there's this interesting, like very big new movement that's happening where countries want to compete for talent on the internet. And if you can be a contributor to that, and if you can be a broker for that trade flow, there's just an immense amount of value there. I don't know what the commercial model for that looks like, but at least today, you can kind of like figure out how to run, default a live experiment to help people with this.
I think the interesting thing also is that if you are someone who is living and earning on the internet, may or may not be in crypto, because there are a lot of people who are freelance developers, content creators, editors, like outside of crypto, where your job is your job reputation network is all internet native and not linked to a country. I think a lot of the Solana economic zone markets are good markets to consider moving your time, capital, and labor to, because they are countries that have shown that they respect, digitally native talent and digitally native capital. I think it's a good place to sort of secure your assets, your earnings, and stuff like that. If you're literally detached from a geography, if you're young and you're mobile, as an experiment, could be something.
Yeah.
That's
It's funny, like every country that we've been to have at least one program that allows for someone who earns money on the internet from working for a foreign company to pay 1% or lower in taxes. So these are very competitive jurisdictions.
awesome. Okay, cool. Now we'll sort of talk a bit more about the SEZ in Kazakhstan, because when you talk about the impact that the SEZ has, right? Like this is like a trade mission, it's a pop-up village, and sort of Kazakhstan stands out in terms of the follow-on products that have launched. And so there's the ETF, there's the stablecoin, there's the dual listing. And then, of course, there's a super team that does developer education stuff. And can you quickly take us through these 4 different products, what they are and what they unlock for sort of Kazakhstan? If you could start with the dual listing, because I think that's super interesting, and then
Yeah.
go on to the rest.
Yeah, I think the dual listing was definitely inspired by some of the conversations I've had with Akshay, where we were just jamming about how like compliance is just going to be like the front end and not the back end for going public anymore. And there's this problem, and I'm sure you've seen this ICM presentation of how the cost of compliance, to get registered to go public in America is just increasing so dramatically. That some of these other jurisdictions that also have stock exchanges, if they're willing to allow for companies to use them for compliance on the front end, but are able to give them access to liquidity on the internet, it completely changes the game. They can actually compete with NASDAQ or NYSE, and they don't have to, again, just like they lose their startups to Delaware, lose their scale-ups to NASDAQ or NYSE. And so we were like over the last year, like just crazy ideas like, man, I just really wonder if a country would be down to legally create a framework that allows for dual listing to happen on chain, such that when a company goes public, there's a percentage of their stock completely legally issued, tokenized, and deployed on chain, and even allow for corporate actions to happen on chain. And so it was just super wild that like the same kind of like you said, talk about that mirability, like take the end state of the idea and try to see someone will meet you in the middle. And we're just blown away when the Sun International Exchange and AIFC and Central Bank were down to meet us at the end state, because they were very ambitious and wanted to get something like category defining done. So it was really crazy. We had our first conversation with them, and then got to signing the MOU within 8 weeks, and then started to actually work together on a lot of the policy upgrades. Thought has been a huge contributor to making sure all the stakeholders were perfectly informed, and that the IFC and especially the FSA was informed of the level of risk that could come with this. And now we're in the process of speaking to a few companies to see like who would actually beta test this product. And so it's super cool. If any company, mature company, is actually interested in going public in Kazakhstan today with AIX and Nasdaq Power Stock Exchange, and dual listing on Solana, you can do it. Like it's fully ready. The product is ready. And so I think it's just a matter of time before we see this happen. And I hope that it's going to happen in Kazakhstan before it happens in the US. I think that's most likely going to be the case. But yeah, it's just a really cool idea, because if you think about it, it's like the US, China, and then the internet in terms of liquidity for capital markets. And so these countries that can now give their local companies access to the liquidity of the internet and the compliance of the nation state is just like, again, another really cool partnership that could only happen between a network and a country.
Yeah, that was pretty wild. Just to sort of boil it down and summarize it in one line. If anyone's not followed this yet, you can basically list a company on the Kazakh Stock Exchange and correspondingly issue its stock on the Solana blockchain and raise money in stablecoins, tokens, or whatever else. And so you get compliance from the nation and you get liquidity from the network. I think it's truly a one of a kind experiment there, and super exciting to see like 8 weeks to MOU agreement, and we- really excited to see who these companies are that take the bite and become like user number 1, 2, 3 of this. I think it'll truly sort of become the, at least we're all pilled into believing it seems like it'll become the default, especially as the US recedes its role from the global backstop. But there's a bunch of other products as well, right? There's the ETF, the stablecoin. Can you sort of talk us through those and what those are and why they're really?
I mean, frankly, I didn't even know the ETF was happening until it was tweeted out. So I think that's again second degree effects of just like the hype we were able to build there and the attention we brought to the jurisdiction. That happened completely organically. I think when the internet found out that Kazakhstan was welcoming to Solana, people went and kind of moved on the opportunity. The national currency stablecoin was actually led primarily by the national bank. They had been going through reviews and discussions for almost 2 years, and I think they wanted to do it in a way that allowed for them to iterate the stablecoin in a sandbox. And they didn't want a vanity like stablecoin, which is something I really appreciate about the national bank there. They're like, if we are deploying this, what we really wanted to do is to see actual adoption and economic usage. Like, how can we allow for legal crypto payments for services rendered, like a hotel stay in Kazakhstan? How can we use this to optimize trade flows between, the CIS states? And at that point, even they were so ambitious and future kind of thinking. They were talking about doing JVs, for the stablecoin with central banks of other countries to have it be a recognized asset to allow for faster trade. And so, yeah, I mean, with them, they really want it to happen. They got a really good partner, with Talgat. Intibix was one of the first issuers, or the first issuer of the stablecoin. And yeah, I think that just came together really well. And I think I don't know if it's launched yet. I'm sure it will be launching soon. And Etherfees tease this, but they've already gotten provisional approval.
Actually, yeah, this is pretty cool. Can you take us through the coalition that launched the stablecoin? So again, just to break down the product, right? So it's a local currency stablecoin. It's not a dollar denominated stablecoin. It's backed by what government bonds or just cash or short-term treasuries of the local currency. Now, Interbix, the issuer, is a crypto exchange, right? And so
Correct.
people can sort of get local stablecoin from there. Let's say they sell crypto or they deposit regular fiat and they can mint out a stable coin. I also saw, I think MasterCard was involved. You mentioned EtherFuse, which is a bond issuer. Can you just talk through the teams that are part of the coalition? And it's probably only a sovereign that can pull together a coalition like this, right? So would love to hear about that.
We finished having a conversation with the National Bank. We got we always like to ask a laundry list of all the RFPs that they have. They usually have internally, requests for products that they want to exist, and try to match make mature institutions within Solana to those RFPs, right? And so something that they really wanted is corresponding banking access to some other regions with fiat crypto flows. So we introduced the Sphere team to the National Bank, and they're working on some cool stuff. And then sovereign bond. I think the best example that we have that helps us a lot with government BD is just the fact that Etherfuse tokenized SEZs, which is the Mexican sovereign bond, and so has it bald. But they sold $200 million of sovereign bonds on the internet. And that's just crazy. That really, every time we say that back, the governments get super excited because they can see a real world use case for crypto that matters to them and start to think about an ecosystem of products that revolves around that. And so, so they're working on a sovereign bond. And then Intibix, I think they worked with Eurasian Bank. I can't remember exactly which one, but a very large local bank, the National Bank, Solana Foundation, and I think MasterCard and JB to launch this. So the idea was to enable for instant off-ramp through, localized national currency stablecoin, and then also to allow for a lot of interesting settlement experience to happen through the card rails using local currency stablecoin. So they're iterating on a lot. I'm sure Talgat could share a lot of really crazy numbers because I know the pilot has been very successful. But it's just really cool to see, and something that we really want to do is we hate vanity MOUs. Like Babak and I are like, what's the point of just signing an agreement for a photo that you tweet on the internet? If you can tangibly go from zero to products launch in partnership with the support of a government, now this creates an amazing playbook, and maybe a new BD strategy that other teams in the ecosystem can get inspired by to work on some really, really large scale projects in other jurisdictions.
Okay, awesome. And we're almost at time. So to wrap us out, can you talk a bit about the permanent node that you're thinking of setting up?
Yeah.
If it is confidential, we'll hold on to this piece until it's announced and we can drop it that day. But we'd love for you to talk about the permanent node that you're setting up.
Facts. I'm activating for NDA, so you definitely can't post this until then because I need to buy the land first. So it'll probably be 6 months before you can post this. But I mean, the main reason we started Forma was because we genuinely did believe there's this huge opportunity for somebody to build literally a physical city or town that connected the network and the state, But where I defer with Balaji a little bit is I don't care about sovereignty and I don't care about military. It's just purely economic. And I think the biggest vector for opportunity is when you can patriotically align with the national economic agenda and pattern match that to the network. And so kind of like the whole Hong Kong, China example, there's this concept of network cities now because of no opinion is becoming very popular. And so while we were going and helping all these countries, we were also searching for our own permanent node for a very long time. And that kind of 2-year search is coming to a conclusion, which is also why like Forma Georgia is going to be our last pop up. We would just flip that region, and now that we found a node, we want to go play like a 10-year game there. But yeah, I mean, it's a place that most people might not know of, an island nation considered a crown dependency, called the Isle of Man, and it's about the size of Singapore. Runs on British common law, has 0% corporate tax, personal income tax capped at 21%, 0% capital gains tax, the top 5 safest countries in the world, and a population of 85,000 people, and just has really friendly, very sophisticated, competent regulators and leadership, and they have full autonomy on lawmaking and a fully kind of independent central bank from the UK. So it's just a wild place where we thought that it kind of met the 4 key pillars of the internet talent, which is immigration, quality of life, incorporation, and then mobility. And it's crazy if you go there on their innovator founder visa program, within 4 to 6 years you can even become a citizen and hold the British citizenship, which is unbelievable for really high skill internet talent. So we've had really good conversations with the nation. They're very excited to work with us, and our goal is to start by building a 1,000 person neighborhood there, literally build the real estate from scratch, and work with the country hand in hand on marketing, on policy, and economic development. And we're really hoping, this could become a long-term Solana zone, or just like an embassy or a home for the internet. Yeah.
So you're saying you're like Solana's Richard Branson at this point. It's taking over an island.
No, we're not taking anything over. They're hosting us, letting us in.
But
Yeah.
Aditya, have we tried this in India? And I'm sure you being here, we've had a lot of conversations. And what is it that we get to hear when we would propose such a thing for, say, the gift city, or say, let's build this in like a Diu, maybe?
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, yeah, I think we've sort of spoken briefly about this as well, Green Farhaj and me, that we should do a Solana economic zone in Gift City or any of the special economic zones, especially because Gift is like a pass-through financial center. Like it wants to become a global financial center like Singapore, Hong Kong, where you can do
Yeah.
dollar banking and foreign currency banking and all. I think it's just I think we're below the surface. It just needs a little bit more of a push before, because like he said, there needs to be some commitment or some skin in the game from the regulator side where you can expect some follow on, where whether it's stable coins, tokenized assets, it could be something else. If there's some willingness to move on product, I mean, that's like, I think we're almost there. We're seeing mentions of stable coins come up in the news here and there. I know
Yeah.
for a fact that privately these things are being evaluated pretty seriously, and I think hopefully in the next 18 months tops, we should have an SEZ in India. I think we just decided this on the fly now, and hopefully, Faraj can make an exception of his last pop-up rule and do one more pop-up for the mothership.
Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely need one in Africa, also. And I think we need one in India. And if it's possible, it would be amazing to have one in China too. And so I mentioned this to Lily and Akshay. I was like, I'd be more than happy for anyone who's actually making a headway on the Solana economic zone. But Bak and I are just more than happy to guide you through everything that we've learned, and support, to get that to an end stage. Because the more of these that we have all over the world, is like a huge win for us. And who knows, it could be way bigger than what we've imagined. I mean, we, for the first time, had a conversation with a country that actually entertained the idea of creating an actual physical Solana economic zone. And we thought they were trolling us, but they were dead serious. And so, I think, I think the opportunity is a lot more exciting than we understand.
but have you ever heard any country say that Solana by itself is just one player in the blockchain ecosystem? And maybe an association of like a Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana
Yeah.
would be better representation of the industry rather than a government wanting to favor one of the 3 platforms that are available? Is this even a legit question that you get asked sometimes, or do you feel that it would help to have an association, or they're all like, they don't see eye to eye on so many things that it's almost like whoever outcompetes the other in building this ends up being the default, which is why it's almost
Yeah.
like saying euro and dollar, and that they're going to um, have their own ways of kind of building dominance in the world.
Yeah, I mean, crypto people ask me this, but I've never had a government ask me that question. So, and to be frank, like Ethereum Foundation, I don't think has ever made really strong effort to go and build relationships with the government and grow them over time. Not that I'm criticizing them, but it's just, I haven't heard of that case. But I know now they're changing. They started working very closely with Argentina. This is crazy. Literally the first time that a nation state has issued a prioritized visa for attendees of a conference to a country through the government portal. And, I know Vitalik was super involved in kind of leading that discussion with the Argentine national government. But yeah, I mean, frankly, like, I don't think the countries are choosing a chain for things at all. Like when we have a conversation, it's like welcoming OpenAI, or Google or one of these like large companies and incentivizing them to come and invest in the country. That's how they usually think of us. And also we go in as Bitcoin maxis. Like I'm a Bitcoin maxi. So I tell them like, Bitcoin is the asset and Solana is just the infrastructure. And so a lot of times the Bitcoin and Solana policy that they make is very, what do you call it? Yeah. It's like mutually beneficial.
But
It's just great. Yeah.
so another thing, there are possibly countries that are also rich and
Yeah.
and have like massive per capita GDPs and
Sure.
are also known as financial hubs. For example, you would think of a Luxembourg, you would think of a Liechtenstein, you would think of maybe like an Ireland, and then a tech country like an Estonia, who are also very welcoming to tech entrepreneurs and want them to build there. Do you think the same playbook works there, or their incentive to build something like a Solana economic zone would be very different? Would they want it as an add-on for their global clientele and companies that are coming in? Or do you think um, it gives the impression that they wouldn't want to maybe burn their bridges with certain other countries where they may have some kind of agreements with of sharing of data? I don't know, but have you ever thought about
Yeah.
these things? Have you faced these questions when you've spoken to these economies?
Yeah, I mean, we had a lot of conversation with governments in Europe, but all I can say is they fill each conversation with an additional layer of bureaucracy. For the most part, it's I would love to see a Solana economic zone pop up in Europe, but the problem at the moment, I think, is there's no clarity in terms of regulatory framework or just even like regulatory consensus for crypto across the European Union. So my hunch is, and I think this is literally going to happen, is the Eastern European countries, right, are just going to outcompete, your Albania, your Georgia, your Serbia are going to outcompete in terms of attracting really cracked crypto talent and companies before the European Union can get their, things figured out on policy. Malta is an exception, but Malta is also extremely expensive jurisdiction. And it's a little bit harder to go the full stack, So yeah, I hope that they do that. This is the reason why we actually chose Isle of Man, because we think that it could become, the most competitive, techno optimistic jurisdiction in the European continent. On its left is Ireland, which is in the EU, and on its right is UK, which is Britain.
And are they all like tax agnostic or uniform in some way? Um, do they when they build a Solana economic zone, do they say, okay, no taxes, there is a tax holiday, or that hasn't come up as a question because companies that are actually building are
Yeah.
only raising capital, but for them to really recover and get to a point of profitability is a little further away. So losing out on tax revenue is not really like something that they're bothered about at the moment.
I mean, honestly, we'd never advise the country to give tax concessions. If there were existing programs that could be forked, to be made compatible with the Solana economic zones, great. Or it could be used by people who want to come to that country, phenomenal. Like in Georgia, they have all of these different tax programs, like the kind of small business status program and the IT specialist program and the 0% digital economic zone tax rule that it's a lot of companies just auto qualified for. And so the economic zone is just targeted marketing, letting the ecosystem know that there's a soft landing and a sense of welcoming there into that country, and that the country has a sophisticated awareness about the needs of founders and developers in our ecosystem. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't think like we need tax concessions necessarily. Like, we just need regulatory clarity. Like, how can you make it easier for someone who wants to get started as a developer or founder in your country to benefit in not just doing on Solana, just by a wide spectrum in kind of Web3? How can you remove as many hurdles as possible for them? And if you want to be competitive on taxes or other things later, then you can. And so we try to just optimize for getting to regulatory clarity and getting to real world use cases of crypto demonstrated within the country, so that there's a little bit more of a positive perception about its potential, versus all the crazy stuff that people tend to hear around the place. Yeah.
All right. I think we're good. That's a wrap.
Banger.
Awesome.